What's going on, everybody? Happy Monday to you. If you're a Commanders fan, possibly a Packers fan, might not be a very happy Monday for you. But either way, we're here. If you need a shoulder to cry on over your Tucker Kraft shares, or you want to celebrate the return of Brock Bowers, we're going to get into week 9, talk about all the games, just about all the games, the major pieces here, risers and fallers, injuries, some data, a lot of that. All right. A lot of people here in the chat already. I see the messages loading in. I see Isaac here in the chat. I see Max, some members here with Max and Captain Munchin and Peyton and Austin. A lot of members here ready to go. We've got some guys to talk about for sure. We're going to get into Kyle Monangai. We're going to get into Tucker Kraft, Roma Dunze, Jaden Daniels, of course, on the thumbnail. So a lot of guys to talk to. The Tucker Kraft thing sucks. Like, he was literally on the thumbnail last week as a riser, and then the ACL tear is just such... I mean, there's no good time for it, but just such a terrible timing on that one. And Rico Dowdle will be talked about as well. This, I didn't actually... I guess I processed this during Red Zone, but kind of didn't think about it again. Joe Alt, season-ending surgery. It sucks. I don't know if it's enough to like meaningfully discount the Chargers offense. Probably matters a little bit more on the margins. Could matter for Hampton. Certainly a slight downgrade, for everybody, I think, rest of season, but I don't know if it's enough in Dynasty to be impacting your decision-making. Just kind of one of those things that's like, okay, that sucks, and you move on and you just hope the team can overcome it. Probably going to hurt more against teams with good pass rushes, and, maybe won't be as much of an issue against the easier defenses. But Scotty is absolutely right. It's a beautiful time to be alive if you traded for Brock Bowers last week. It feels so good, man. Brock Bowers comes back, gives us the highest scoring, I believe the highest scoring fantasy performance for any player this year. Certainly in your regular 4-point passing touchdown PPR leagues, highest scoring performance for any player. Ironically, the second highest is Trey Tucker, which is just hilarious. Like, both of them are Raiders, but yeah, man, Brock Bowers is so legit. Exactly what we were hoping to see. We're going to talk about him a couple times today, so I won't waste too long on that. We will jump into the data drop here in a second. John Atlas, obviously super sad for Kraft and for Daniels. I don't even have that much Tucker Kraft in Dynasty. I only have a couple of shares, but just sucks to see, like, he was having such an amazing breakout season. And just to see that cut short just is really unfortunate. No doubt about it. And then Daniels, like, you have to feel for Jaden Daniels. The guy can't get any help. He can't catch a break. He does need to get out of his own way a little bit. He needs to play safer, especially with his frame. Like, he needs to be a little less aggressive, maybe learn a bit from like Lamar Jackson. Luckily, this injury for Jaden Daniels, we'll talk about it again, is not expected to be like a long-term major concern. So that's at least a good thing. It certainly looked horrible, but apparently it's a simple dislocation, and that means the recovery is not that complicated, and he could come back this year. I don't know why he would need to come back this year. Like, clearly it's over. This season's over for the Commanders. They're not making the playoffs. So I'd probably just keep him out the rest of the year, but he could come back, and that's good. That means, we shouldn't have any dynasty concerns about him beyond this season, at least as far as his actual health. All right, we're going to jump into the data drop. The data drop is where I just share some interesting data from accounts that I like to follow. Datarama, JJ Zacharyson, Ryan Heath, Jacob Gibbs at times, other accounts that pop up. Today I have, I think 4 different tweets I want to look at. And these are typically players that don't pop up on the risers and fallers. I'm going to start with the Seattle backfield here. I thought this was interesting. So what we've seen throughout the season is Kenneth Walker consistently being subbed out whenever the Seahawks get close to the end zone. It's like comical how much they stick to this. But this past week, Walker was actually able to stay on the field for a series and got a couple touches inside of the 10-yard line, which I thought was pretty cool. Ultimately, it still ends in comical fashion for Kenneth Walker because AJ Barner gets subbed in for basically a quarterback sneak when Walker got stopped at the 1-yard line. So he still wasn't able to score, but maybe we're seeing a little bit of a change coming out of the bye week where the Seahawks, for whatever reason, no longer feel that Charbonnet has to be the designated back in close. It's a small sample of snaps, but I do think it's meaningful that he was getting subbed out in this situation every single time, basically since week 2. And this week, that did not happen. So maybe a little bit more hope for Walker. Still going to be nothing more than a low-end RB2 every week, but a little bit of light there for Walker. And certainly it hurts Charbonnet, where his whole thing was just stealing touchdowns. He's not going to generate explosives at the same rate as Walker, so he becomes a little bit less appealing of a start. Next, we'll talk about Brock Bowers here. And we're going to talk about him twice, but this one I wanted to talk about here. Jacob Sanderson made a really interesting case for Brock Bowers prior to the season, talking about basically how we should treat Brock Bowers the same way we treat F wide receivers. So these are like bigger slot wide receivers like Amon-Ra St. Brown, like Drake London. Obviously, those guys aren't the exact same size, but they're physical wide receivers that are capable of blocking, and they run sort of this inside-outside deployment where they get a healthy amount of slot snaps, but they also play out wide in 2 wide receiver sets. And the argument was like, if Brock Bowers was just a wide receiver and he did what he did as a rookie, you'd be easily drafting him in the first round. But because he's listed as a tight end, you guys think he's going to regress, or you think he's not going to perform. So this is a little bit of a circle back to that tweet from the summertime. In week 9, his first game back from injury, Brock Bowers ran 35 routes, and he was aligned 37% out wide, 51% from the slots, and only 11% in line or in the backfield. Basically, the Raiders went full-time 2 tight end sets. They let Michael Mayer play most of the real tight end stuff, and they just let Brock Bowers cook from outside, from in the slot, because he is a very special mover at his size, and he can actually succeed at that. And comparing it to Amon-Ra St. Brown's alignment in 2025, where he's playing 47% out wide, 52% from the slot, and 1% in line or backfield. So in his first game back from injury, Brock Bowers basically played Amon-Ra St. Brown's role, except take 10% of the out wide snaps and make those inline snaps. And I would argue that those inline snaps are actually an advantage relative to Amon-Ra, because he's more likely to be matched up. Infinitely more likely to be matched up on a linebacker or safety in those situations. And that's obviously a case where Brock Bowers is going to win. So this is I just think it's a really interesting way to look at him as a player and to not think of him as a tight end, really, because he's not like just a tight end. He is a fully capable wide receiver playing with the positional designation of tight end, which is what makes him such an advantage. It's what makes him, in my opinion, so easily the tight end 1 in Dynasty. It's not really close. And yeah, he's not going to score 40 fantasy points every week, but if I was picking today, he would very clearly be my pick to be the tight end one for the rest of the season. So if you've been holding on to Brock, if you bought low, you should feel very good about that. And it definitely felt good to get him back in the lineup and have that performance. All right, guys, I see the questions. I'll hit a couple before I move on to the next slide here on the data drop. Trade Hurts for Jaden Daniels. I am still working my way through the rankings update. I have them right next to each other. I don't think there's like a clear right answer. If you are absolutely out of it for this season, I think trading Hurts for Jaden Daniels is probably a smart move. I think if you're competing, you're not getting enough of a value win to make that trade. Like, I don't think you need to make that trade on a team where you're using Hurts. But yeah, for a rebuilder, I mean, you get the younger player, you get, I think, the more ultimately long-term, higher ceiling player, but it's not as simple as it would have been, obviously, prior to the injury. And also that team has some serious problems in terms of infrastructure. Like, McLaurin is going to be 32 next year, or 31 next year. Debo's aging out. Ertz is aging out. They don't have any talent. They don't have any pass catchers. Like, they have a lot to figure out. And it's not a guarantee that Jaden Daniels is going to be in an awesome situation next year. So we'll see. I'm not really sweating the Daniel Jones start, to be honest. They had a bad game, and Daniel Jones is not necessarily going to be the guy that can dig you out of a big deficit when they can't really run the ball effectively. It's not that different than Jared Goff. We've seen this from Goff when the Lions get out behind. He can get a little bit flustered if there's too much pressure in his face, and he can make bad decisions. I don't think it's really that different. I just think that we have this idea of Daniel Jones imploding, face planting, and that's totally fair and like warranted across his career. I don't think that this one game where the Steelers' defensive line was clearly dominating should really change our opinion of Daniel Jones or the Colts offense. I think they'll probably just bounce back and be fine. They do have a tough pass rush matchup again next week against the Falcons, but I don't know. If I had to guess, I'd say that they get right back on track next week. They should at least have an easier time getting Taylor going. The Falcons have really struggled to contain James Cook, Trevion Henderson in recent weeks. I suspect we'll see Taylor have a big game and get back on track. Traded a 27-second for Rico a couple days ago. Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to age pretty well. We'll talk about Rico when we get to Risers. This is insane. You got Bowers for Travis Hunter and Scattaboo before the game. That's like unreal. I don't know what I'm supposed to say about that. That's crazy. Great move. All right. Let's look at the second slide here on the data drop. Two more tweets. One from the GOAT, JJ Zacharyson, about Parker Washington, who I saw was just mentioned in the chat. Parker Washington led all Jaguars in routes in week 9. He also finished with a 27.3% target share, scoring 17 points. Every year, there are these guys that show up out of nowhere and just become PPR scam machines, right? We've seen Wan'Dale Robinson make a career out of this. Other names are escaping me right now. Drop them in the chat if you can think of who these people are. I've seen a pretty funny term for this that I think is kind of fitting. I don't know who came up with this, but they were calling Parker Washington a target goblin. And that is really what it feels like. Like, I think everybody knows that Parker Washington is not a player that should have 9 catches for 80 yards, but he is getting the kind of easy button stuff. I think Olamide Zaccheaus is in the same category. He's getting the easy stuff largely from the slot that results in these short area targets for kind of a broken offense. And it's working, and it's probably going to keep working. They're going to keep doing it because they don't have a lot of guys. Like, Brenton Strange should be back eventually, and that could impact him a little. De'Ami Brown is not very good. Brian Thomas is clearly not healthy. So Parker Washington will continue to be a target goblin. I think he's going to be a guy that you can pretty comfortably flex in your start 10, start 11 leagues until if and when Travis Hunter is back. So he was free off of Dynasty waivers. If he's still out there, you can go ahead and bid on him in a full PPR if you need some depth. But yeah, he is frustratingly here to stay. 27% target share is crazy. Next tweet is from Ryan Heath. The Saints have played just over 5 quarters under Tyler Shuck over the past 2 weeks. Targets, yards, fantasy points in that span. We have Shaheed at 17 targets, 113 yards, and sorry, it's a little small on my screen, 22 fantasy points. Juwan at 10, 86, 18.6, and Olave at just 10, 77, 14.7. This is one game. I mean, this is one game and then one quarter where they were like way behind. I'm not willing to just extrapolate this and assume this is the new normal, and I'm not benching Chris Olave. I don't think most teams have that luxury. If you have like an insanely deep roster, I guess you can bench Olave. He's not like a smash play, but I think he's still clearly a top 36 wide receiver. I'm not going to read into this too much. I don't know what the exact matchup looked like against the Rams, like who was covering Olave, who was covering Shaheed, but in essentially a one game sample, we can't just assume that this is the norm. I think Chris Olave is better than Rashid Shaheed. I think he has kind of shown that he is the more target dominant player overall, but chemistry also plays a role in the NFL. So just something to monitor. There's also the possibility that by tomorrow's NFL trade deadline, Rashid Shaheed is on a different football team. So just something to monitor. I'm not moving Chris Olave in the rankings. Honestly, Tyler Shuck looks so awful. I don't think it's a guarantee that he plays the whole year. I think by the time we get to the fantasy playoffs, it could just be Spencer Rattler again. So, it is what it is. Just something to monitor. Thought that was kind of interesting. All right. Okay. Let's move on from the data drop and let's talk about the any second list. After the any second list, and before we get to risers and fallers, I will take a few more questions. The any second list, guys, is a list. Let me just pull it up. The any second list is a list of players that in your dynasty league, assuming it's a pretty standard, like 12 teams start 10 super flex in that sort of general range. These are guys that I would send away for any second round rookie pick. And the point of this list is just churning players on your bench for draft capital is going to work out for you in the long run. Sometimes the players that you trade away might have good games. Sometimes they might even gain more value than you think, and they might end up being worth more than a second round pick someday. But I think overall, if you can follow through on this type of an exercise with most players, you are going to come out ahead and you're going to have a lot more flexibility in trade. So that's what I'm trying to do. I don't nail every call, but last week I said to send away Jordan Mason, Tyler Shuck, or Keon Coleman for a second. Not a guarantee that gets done in every league. Tyler Shuck especially was probably a long shot. My argument was just any starting quarterback in Superflex, you have a chance to do that. Hopefully you were able to. Otherwise, could be an asset you're just carrying to zero. Also, thanks. Shout out TL9953 in the chat. Thank you. This is very nice of you, and you're very welcome. Hopefully it's helpful. This week, we have some long-time fantasy stars on the any second list. I think it's time. The end is near for Alvin Kamara, for Keenan Allen, and for Mark Andrews. These are guys that I'm fine trading for any second. We got less than 2 fantasy points for Alvin Kamara this week, and that's not necessarily going to hold. I think you'll have better games. This was a clearly, massively negative game script. The Saints barely ran any plays. This is a pretty good Rams defense. Hopefully they can sustain some longer drives in the future. But, 6 total rush attempts, 3 targets. The 3 targets was still a 12% target share, but this offense is terrible. Kamara is not efficient anymore on the ground. Taysom Hill steals goal line opportunities. They don't even have many goal line opportunities to begin with. It's just really rough for Kamara. I don't know if, when, or how it could get better. So He's an easy sell for me for a second if you can get it. Keenan Allen is kind of the odd man out now that Oronde Gadsden has broken out. You might think that it's Quentin Johnston, but it's not really when you look at playing time. Looking at the snaps and stuff, Keenan Allen only played 51% of the snaps this past week, and that has been a trend over the last 3 or 4 games as long as QJ's been out there. Quentin Johnston is running significantly more routes. So QJ, Ladd, and Gadsden are now the new like trio for this team. They ran over 30 routes each. Keenan only ran 20 routes in this game. So it's not like nothing, but it is lower certainly than the other 3. And Trey Harris ran 14 routes. I saw someone ask about Trey Harris breakout incoming. I don't think that's the case. I think Trey Harris has earned himself some playing time mostly as a run blocker. And because the Chargers run out of these heavy sets where they will run the ball, but then they'll also like play action and throw the ball, Trey Harris is on the field running routes in some of those situations, and that's getting him on the field. It's also getting other players like Keenan Allen off the field. So I think Trey Harris's main role right now is to just kind of be annoying and steal fantasy production from the guys we actually want to start. But I mean, shout out to him for at least earning some kind of a role on the team when it seemed like he might have just been a totally wasted pick. So yeah, Keenan Allen, I would sell him for a second because he's 33 years old. I don't know what kind of value he carries after this year. And he's really, to me, just projects like a flex play rest of season. Some weeks the team is going to throw the ball enough and he's just going to happen to be on the receiving end of a touchdown or just have a matchup they can exploit. But you're going to see a lot of games like this as well, where it's single digit PPR points because he's not out there enough to be consistently trusted. And then Mark Andrews had the 2 touchdown game. That's what Mark Andrews does. He pops up every once in a while for a 2 touchdown game. If you have him in a Dynasty Best Ball league, feel free to hold him, I guess. I just acquired him in a Dynasty Best Ball league because I thought the price was good, but in a managed format, I'm not thrilled with Mark Andrews. He had a 13% target share in this game. JJ Zacharyson points out he has not reached a 20% target share in 4 straight games. He ran only half the routes. He's splitting the routes in half with Isaiah Likely. So the role is bad. The usage is bad. Sometimes he comes down in the end zone, and that's great. But I'd much rather have a second-round pick than just play touchdown roulette with Mark Andrews every single week. So that's my any second list for today. Alvin Kamara, Keenan Allen, Mark Andrews. Before we jump into risers and fallers, I'll try to catch up on the chat if you guys want to drop a few more questions, and then I'll try to push through those lists as quickly as I can, get some more interesting stats to you, and kind of update your outlook on some guys. Can we get some content soon on the 2026 class and values compared to active players? I'm just going to be totally honest. I don't have the bandwidth during the season to really look into the 2026 class at all. I'm not like a Devy player. I'm not a big college football watcher. I dig into the rookie class and like the profiles and stuff once the fantasy season's over. So you probably won't see any 2026 content here for the rest of the season. I'm going to be focused on trade deadline, updating rankings, that kind of stuff. And also having a baby. But if you want to go check out some other channels, I know like Dynasty Domain did a 2026 overview, at least for running backs and wide receivers, that I thought was pretty interesting. At least get some names out to you and kind of give you an overview of what these guys' careers look like, where they might get drafted. So yeah, I would send you in their direction and just stick around here, you know, in the early parts of the off season. That's when you'll start to get some of my thoughts. I sold Monangai and Brashard Smith for the 202 and mid-third on a rebuild. Nervous I sold too early. Did I do okay? No, I think you did totally fine here. I mean, obviously Monangai's value has risen after this past week, but Brashard Smith's is probably down a bit. I don't think it's likely that we get to a point where you really, really regret getting an early second for those players, you know, on top of the 3rd round pick. So I think you did fine. Thoughts on JMO? Nothing. My thoughts on JMO don't really change. Like he he has a bunch of bad games and then he'll pop up and have a decent game where he scores a touchdown. Like that's just what he does. I didn't look at it. I really doubt there was anything particularly noteworthy about how his usage changed in that game. Let me just pull it up real quick. Week 9, Lions, Jamison Williams, 18% targets per route run. He got 6 targets. Laporta got 8. Amon-Ra got 12. Yeah, I mean, he had a 16% target share, 4 total catches, 66 yards, and a touchdown. Nothing really notable. Like he's the same guy. He's just some weeks he's going to have a usable score and some weeks he's not. So nothing there. Shakir is kind of just like fancy Wan'Dale Robinson on a better offense. Like he doesn't run all the routes and he has a low ADOT, and sometimes it doesn't matter because he plays with Josh Allen or he makes like a big yak play. I don't think I'll be moving Shakir or Jamison Williams in the rankings this week based on these performances. Should I try to ship Likely for ETN and trust Loveland at the tight end position? I do think you can trust Loveland at the tight end position. He's going to be a riser. And I think I do have ETN ranked ahead of Likely. So if you need running back help right now, I think that's a totally fair deal. When do you decide whether to pack it in for next year or move players to try and compete now when battling injuries? I think if you have Burrow, Daniels, Hampton, and Neighbors and Brian Thomas, you should be packing it in for sure. I think that's just too much to try to overcome. You're going to lose a ton of roster value trying to flip all those guys. So I would move on. Are we selling high on Gadsden and Fannin are here to stay? My Dynasty League has +2 PPR on tight ends, +1 for wide receivers. Okay. So a full point premium for tight ends. I'm not selling high on either. I think Gadsden especially is super legit. Fannin, I'm less convinced that his role will maintain, but don't quote me on that. I'm not like 100% one way or the other. And I think he's going to continue doing what he's been doing the rest of the year. So you can kind of decide in the offseason if the team is going to continue to feature him as kind of an undersized, not unspecial athlete, whether they're going to do that or whether they're going to be able to bring in different weapons, whether they're going to change up the passing game. I don't know for sure. My concern with Fannin is just that he could end up being a guy that gets limited playing time because he's not a viable inline blocker at his size. And I don't know if he's special enough with the ball that you would, use him out wide in a ton or in the slot a ton when you have if you have a legit slot wide receiver, which the Browns do not have currently. But yeah, you can hold both of them for now. Is Trevion Henderson after the game yesterday an option to buy and hope he rises as a non-contender? Yeah, for sure. He's a riser. We'll talk about him in a moment. Really no change on my view for RJ Harvey. He's getting some passing work. He's not really getting a lot of rush attempts. Kind of a gadget player right now. I think he looks fine. I think he makes some impressive plays. He's not necessarily a complete running back. I don't think we really even have enough sample to say whether he is or not. But yeah, I like him. He's an interesting speculative buy. I think you would have a ton of upside if Dobbins was to get hurt. So you have that angle as well. And who knows after the season, whether Dobbins is back with the team or whether their usage shifts. I don't know. He's a tricky guy to evaluate, but I have him in that early second range in terms of dynasty value. Roma Dunze and Loveland will be guys we talk about in the Risers and Fallers. So stick around for that. Don't go anywhere. I'll go over that whole situation. Same with the Bears running back room. I'm going to talk about that. I'll talk about Travis Hunter here and then move on to the Risers. Is Travis Hunter a buy? Yes. Travis Hunter is the biggest buy in Dynasty right now. I don't think it's even close. He is a humongous buy. Go get him everywhere you possibly can. He was getting ready to explode. This passing game is broken without him. And I think he's going to be so awesome when he's back. I don't know when he's going to be back. I wouldn't buy him, thinking he's going to carry you to a championship this year. But I think the long-term outlook for Hunter is so much more favorable than it was, just a few weeks ago. And because he got hurt, he didn't have a chance to build on the momentum of that week 7 game, especially with the bye week in between. So I think between now and whenever he's back on a football field, it could be the last chance you have to get Travis Hunter at a discount. So yeah, big time buy. All right, let's go back to the little split screen here, and let's go to the risers. Risers for this week, starting at the top with our king, Brock Bowers. We're running it back to Brock Bowers here at the top of the list. Honestly, I didn't really move Bowers very much because I have been holding the line. I've been keeping the faith on Brock Bowers, but he is back and he should be rising in your perception. He should be rising in rest of season rankings. He looks fantastic. He looks healthy. So hopefully he stays healthy. I have another tweet here from Ryan Heath, just another fun way to look at what Bowers has done this year. It says, even if we count overtime as a full quarter, Brock Bowers has essentially played 8 quarters of healthy football this year. His per 4 quarters averages in that span, 10.5 targets would be wide receiver 3, 115 receiving yards would be wide receiver 2, and 29.3 fantasy points per game would be wide receiver 1. Obviously, that stuff is not just scalable. You can't just assume he's going to score 29 fantasy points per game. Still an interesting way to look at it. He has gone over 100 yards easily in his 2 healthy games. He did it in week 1 in about 3 quarters. And then he did it this week and he cleared that number by, quite a bit. So sky's the limit for this guy. There's no reason he can't score as like a top 5 wide receiver type of asset the rest of the way. So Ashton Genty, his teammate, is also a riser for me. It was nice seeing Ashton Genty have a nice game here. He has struggled due to the situation. I haven't seen anything this year from Genty that makes me question the talent profile that got him drafted in the top 10. I definitely have questioned the Raiders' personal decision to draft him in the top 10 given their roster many times, but I have not questioned the talent of Genty. I don't think there's any reason to question the talent. He just has no room to operate, but this week he got 90% of the snaps. He had a 12.8% target share, which is very respectable. He got all 13 of the running back carries, which is certainly not a lot of carries, but it's good to see he got all of them. And he ran 25 of the 28 routes that the running backs ran. So he was as much of a full-time bell cow as you can possibly be in this offense. And that's going to help him get there even when the offense is struggling. If he's going to get that much of the work, he can still get you at least that RB2 production. And anytime the offense is gelling, he's going to have the chance to give you 18, 19, 20 points like we just saw yesterday. And hopefully Bowers helps sustain more drives, helps get them into the red zone, helps teams maybe respect the pass a little bit more, so that opens up space for Genty. So everything is better with Bowers on the field. And Genty remains my RB3 in Dynasty. He never wavered. He never moved off that spot for me. But I think he probably gets a couple spots bump in my rankings. And I think market-wise, where you might have seen him slipping more because he wasn't producing, you want to jump on that if possible. We've got a couple more rookies here. One being Travion Henderson, running back for the Patriots, who has been featured on the Fallers list more than once this year, has not been on the Risers list a single time. It seems like every week I was just moving him down a little bit further in the rankings until finally he showed us. All it took was Ramondre Stevenson getting a toe injury, and all of a sudden Mike Vrabel can trust his 36th overall pick. I don't think that Henderson did anything this week that was particularly more interesting than he did last week as far as how he played. Thought he looked really good against the Browns. I thought he looked really good against the Falcons. But here's the important part, right? They let Henderson run the show. He got 75% of the snaps. That might surprise you if you were just looking at the box score, because Terrell Jennings did get 11 carries. Basically, if Terrell Jennings was on the field, he was getting a carry, whereas Henderson He was getting carries. He was also playing in pass protection. He was playing in the 2-minute drill. He was running routes. That's pretty big in this offense that he was being trusted to do all of that. I mean, they didn't have a lot of options, but they did sign Dearness Johnson. They elevated him from the practice squad. He's a guy who's done that role for his whole career. They could have just put him in there to be the shield for Drake May and, block defensive ends, and they didn't. And I think Henderson played really well in that. So that's the kind of foothold you need him to get so that he can build on these performances and eventually leapfrog Ramondre, phase him out. So that's pretty huge, 75% of snaps. He also flashed his receiving ability. He got 5 receptions in this game. And again, he just looked awesome. When they can get him the ball in space, it's great. Yeah, and he easily led the team in expected fantasy points, even with Terrell Jennings vulturing that goal line touch. So, yeah, good things for Henderson. He definitely would be a riser for me. I don't know, what the market's going to make of this. He didn't get the touchdown. He didn't score a huge total. So maybe some opportunity to buy low this week. It can't hurt to send out some offers for Trevion Henderson. I don't think you'll be buying low on Colston Loveland after this week. Colston Loveland was a guy I had called out as a buy low candidate at least once. Probably have mentioned him on this particular stream a couple of times as well. I think we finally saw Colston Loveland do the types of things that we thought he could do as a prospect. The athleticism on that game-winning touchdown to bounce off of the defender and then accelerate away and get to the end zone was pretty impressive. The first touchdown was arguably just as impressive, where he was able to, make a really nice cut and release into the end zone. He was the first read on a red zone passing play, which is great. He had a 19% target share in this game, which isn't crazy. His first read target share was pretty encouraging. 21% was tied for the team lead with DJ Moore and Olamide Zaccheaus. So he's not the focal point of the passing game, but we've seen his role and usage increase over the last few weeks since their bye. Cole Kmet left this game with another injury. Every performance like this, it just instills confidence in the coaches and encourages Ben Johnson to say, okay, hey, maybe we do, run a few more first reads towards Colston Loveland. So I love to see that. He's still going to be a guy that's growing and improving because he's so young, but there's flashes here, and there is upside still for him to get up to that Tyler Warren range. So very encouraging day for Colston Loveland. Hopefully more of those to come. Personally, I think you can start Loveland now moving forward as, at the very least, a low-end tight end 1 with these spike week upside as well. And especially, with Tucker Kraft out of the picture, it's another tight end down. So yeah, I think he's pretty easily that guy. I don't know if I agree with this. RJ Harvey is 2025 Tyrone Tracy. I think I see the parallels in that he's an older prospect, largely contributing as a pass catcher. I think the difference being that RJ Harvey was invested with a top 60-ish pick. And honestly, I think some of his performance has actually been a little bit more impressive than what we saw from Tracy. Obviously, it's on a much smaller sample, but some of the explosive runs that he's had, and then the stuff he's been able to do in the passing game, and then also just having Sean Payton as his play caller with those design plays, I think is going to be a little bit different. So I don't know how it's going to play out for him, but the difference for me would be I don't see the Broncos investing more in this backfield in the offseason versus the Giants, who went out and got Scatterbo because they only had Tracy, and he was not a huge investment by the team. So I don't know if I'd make that comparison, but certainly if he can't grow his role at all by the end of the year, there's going to be some risk and unknown that could reduce his value a bit. All right. JJ McCarthy was the next riser. I think he has to be a riser because there was question of just whether he was functional at all. It was just such a weird journey for him where He played so bad in week 1 until the fourth quarter, and then he has this one miracle quarter where he makes some seemingly amazing plays, wins the game, and then he looks terrible in week 2 against the Falcons. Since then, we've learned that the Vikings are a weaker offense overall than we expected, and the Falcons' defense is a lot better than we expected. So in that light, it looks a little bit less damning to see how much he struggled in his second career start, knowing the offensive line woes, knowing how good that pass rush is for the Falcons. It's like, okay, maybe we can give him a pass. He comes out in this one. They do manage to beat the Lions. He didn't play a flawless game by any stretch. He missed some throws for sure, but he also made some good throws, and I think it's something to build on. So has to be a riser. I wouldn't go crazy, but at least rebuild a little bit of that confidence in McCarthy. Then we have Chase Brown. Chase Brown benefited from an injury. We often see backup running backs that benefit when starters get hurt. This is a case where the starting running back is benefiting from the backup getting hurt. Samaje Perine left with an ankle injury. He has a high ankle sprain, so he's going to miss some time. And I think we're just basically running it back now with 2024 Chase Brown, because he played 62 of 66 offensive snaps. He ran 41 routes in this game, and he saw 14 targets, which is absurd usage. But obviously, it's an unusual game environment. But the point is that he absorbed the entire workload. And I don't know if I would project him for a 94% snap share in a week that they go into it knowing they don't have Samaje Perine. But the only other running back on this team is Taj Brooks. And I don't think they're going to put the 6th round rookie out there for the same snaps as Samaje Perine, where Perine was being used for those third downs, pass blocking situations, 2-minute drill, whatever. They're not putting Taj Brooks in that spot. So I think Chase Brown is going to become kind of Kyron Williams again. And he's going to just get, 80% of the snaps. And then Taj Brooks is going to mix in as more of like a change of pace guy. He's going to take some early down carries probably. Whereas Chase Brown's going to absorb some more of that valuable receiving work. So I think at least for the short term, he moves back into that high end RB2, maybe even low end RB1 conversation. Probably a guy I would look to sell high on teams where I'm not super desperate for the production, because I'm still not a huge believer long-term in Chase Brown. Samaje Perine theoretically should be back and involved in this offense by the time we get to the fantasy playoffs. So if you can sell off of Chase Brown, you might even be able to get to a first for him. I did see him move for a first in one of my leagues. If you could get up to a first for him, even if you have to add a piece, I think that's actually a pretty huge win. And then you can maybe backfill him with somebody like a Rico Dowdle, who we'll talk about in a second. So just a thought on Chase Brown. But again, you're going to get the production here in the short term. Rico Dowdle is next on the risers list. He had a freaking game against the Packers. I had to start him in some leagues just because I didn't have a ton of options. Once we got the news that he was going to be more of the focal point, I was a little bit less freaked out about that. But I did not see this coming. I didn't think more of a focal point meant he was going to get 75% of the running back rush attempts and a 15% target share. I mean, that is one of the better roles in the league for any running back. He scored 28 fantasy points in this game. He looked awesome. I don't know what the heck is going on. Somebody needs to drug test this man. I don't know what's gotten into Rico Dowdle, but he is playing unreal football right now. 30% target share for, sorry, that's a different note about McMillan. Not talking about Ted McMillan, but under the Panthers category. He did have a 30% target share in this game, by the way. They just didn't throw the ball at all. But anyway, Rico Dowdle, 75% of attempts. That's an amazing role. So he is a riser. I haven't decided how high I'm going to rise him, but I think he is like legitimately in the low-end RB1 conversation for the rest of the season. This team is very good at running the ball, and Rico especially is just every single week he plays amazing football. So if he's going to get this type of a workload, if the team is comfortable and willing to scale back Chuba Hubbard, Chuba Hubbard's not doing anything to earn that work back. So it is now full systems go for Rico. I don't know what makes him dramatically different from somebody like Chase Brown, right? Where I don't know what things look like after this year, but I know for the rest of this year, he's going to be really useful. So I'd rather have Rico in Dynasty than David Montgomery, J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Swift, a lot of guys like that. I'd rather have him than Travis Etienne, personally. He's getting a little more passing game work. I think he looks better. So, yeah. So anyway, yeah. JMO2255. This is just like a major oversimplification, to be honest. Everyone's saying to sell Chase Brown for over a year. He's still putting up solid numbers. So prior to this week, Chase Brown did not have he hadn't even hit a 10% target share with Joe Flacco. And I mean, you can go and look at the game logs for Chase Brown. Like he was not putting up solid numbers. A lot of that wasn't his fault in the sense that the offense with Jake Browning was not functional. The offensive line has been bad. But I mean, even after this past game, he's at 12.2 fantasy points per game. That's running back 22 on the season. He scored 19 points this week and 25 points last week. Keep in mind, those are two insane shootouts that had way higher like scoring and passing volume than you would expect in an average game. Before that, he scored 12, 9, 12, 10, 6, 8, and then he scored 13 in week 1 with Joe Burrow. He has only scored a touchdown in 2 games this year. I don't think he's been putting up solid numbers. I'm telling you, the role for Chase Brown improved because Samaje Perine got hurt, and that's probably going to continue as long as Samaje Perine is out. The team does not want Chase Brown to be playing 80% of the snaps, and based on how they've used him prior to this point, they don't really want to be peppering him with targets either. So I think he's a totally fine running back. He can fill in when he's asked to, and he can play this large volume role when he has to. That's not the team's goal. So I'm just saying, if you can cash out for anything close to a first and just lock in that value, as opposed to holding a guy that probably projects as an RB2, low-end RB2, maybe mid RB2 in the fantasy playoffs, and then who knows after the season, I think that is how I would play it personally. All right. Kyle Monangai is the next riser here. He had just like a comical game in terms of the overall volume. Just absurd. He had a 74% snap share and an 84% running back rush share, as well as a 16% target share. And those numbers don't sound that insane, but he had, I think, 27 rush attempts in this game. So like they gave Kyle Monangai like a prime Derrick Henry workload in this game. I mean, it was just unreal. And that's because DeAndre Swift was hurt and Roshan Johnson was hurt. But Kyle Monangai played very well. I mean, he ran really well. He ran really well against a bad defense, to be fair. The Bengals have a terrible, terrible defense. So that's going to inflate anyone's stats. DeAndre Swift was, equally effective to this prior to his injury. It's just that he was splitting with Monangai. Monangai wasn't splitting with him because there was no one to split with. So I don't think this is a case where it's like, oh my gosh, Kyle Monangai is here. He's going to take over the whole backfield, and now DeAndre Swift is useless. I think this just reinforces the fact that both of these players are finding success in this offense. And it's very much like a Gibbs-Montgomery type of split when Swift is healthy, where it's going to be pretty much 50-50. Monangai might get a little bit more of the work up close because he's a bigger back. Swift might get a little bit more of the passing game work because he's a little bit better in space. But after a rough start to the year, the Bears have kind of figured out this run game, and that's actually hurt all of the pass catchers, and it's really been big for the running backs. So a lot of contingent upside for Monangai now. There's going to be some standalone value. Gotta like that. I think Monangai this week is going to jump over Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who I didn't put in the Fallers list because I'm just going to talk about all the commanders when I get to Daniels. But I will be jumping Monangai ahead of JCM for now. I still think Bill is probably the better player. I think if you put Bill on the Bears, I think we'd be pretty impressed with what he could do. But I mean, you can't take away anything from a guy who averaged 6 yards a carry or something on 27 carries. So great game for him. And then the last riser is Torrey Horton. Torrey Horton, the Seahawks offense is so weird because they throw so infrequently, and it's like nearly 50% of the time when they throw, it's going to JSN. So it's like kind of hard for anybody to really be consistent in the passing game after JSN because there's just like not enough work to go around. So even in this game, Torrey Horton only got 4 targets. He caught all 4 for 48 yards and 2 touchdowns. So it was all about touchdowns for Horton, but that was still the second most targets on the team, tied with AJ Barner. He ran 83% of the routes, and he's just like flashed his ability all the time throughout this season. He's had some he had like a kick return touchdown. He's had other touchdowns he's scored on offense. I just think he looks like a solid player. So I would bet on his role growing over time. And Cooper Kupp is just so mega washed. He's going to be gone after this year, probably either way. So yeah, it's possible the Seahawks add somebody else. It's possible Horton never really rises above role player, but I think he has to be a riser because he's flashed some ability. He could just end up being a solid complementary wide receiver to JSN. And you got to like that. You got to like that. So I think it's tough with these wide receivers that are like explosive downfield guys, especially when they flash the like big play touchdown ability before they really flash the target earning ability. Like, just speaking personally, I would struggle to go out and just send a random second for Torrey Horton. That's just not how I like to spend draft capital. I'd rather hold that pick and have the flexibility to do other stuff with it, because he's not a guy that you're going to really be starting this year. And there's not a guarantee of like what the offensive depth chart looks like next year. So I'm not quite there yet. I think I'll move him into my late second tier. And typically guys in that tier, I'm not actually looking to trade second round picks for. I just think they're close in value to players you draft in the late second. So that's where I'm going to put him. Definitely a riser though. And someone to keep an eye on over the back half of the year to see if that role grows, if the target earning ability grows. And certainly someone to get thrown into trades if you can do that. All right. Let's jump over to Fallers, and then I'll take more questions at the end. If you've been waiting for me to answer questions, stick around, ask it at the end. And guys, I forget to do this every week. Can some of you that tune in, that are regular tune into the show, can you please remind me or put in the chat, tell people to like the stream and subscribe to the channel, because we are 52 minutes in at this point. But if you're watching and you haven't subscribed, if you haven't liked the video, please do that. It helps the channel grow, helps more people find it. It really helps me grow the brand, and I definitely would appreciate it. Let's go over to Fallers. Like I said, last slide of the day, last list of the day. We start with a pretty unfortunate addition to the list, which is Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels suffered a pretty nasty dislocated elbow. I had no idea this happened. I was tracking the game. I fell asleep. I must have fallen asleep like 5 minutes before this happened, because it was pretty close to the end of the game. And I was like, I'm probably not getting any more fantasy points out of anybody. And I woke up and I had no idea. I checked the box score, but I didn't check Twitter or anything. So I was like, okay, they didn't score again. Chris Rodriguez got a touchdown, whatever. So I was like shocked. I was like shocked when I saw that this happened. And it was a bummer, man. It definitely killed the vibe this morning for me. You hate to see this stuff happen. It's just been such a cursed season for Jaden Daniels. Again, I said at the top of the show, the good news for this is that it's not considered a long-term injury at all. Like, he could legitimately, there's a chance he could play 5 weeks from now. So that's way better than it seemed, watching it on TV. It is his non-throwing arm. It is a simple dislocation, so it's not a complicated recovery, I guess. But I don't really see any reason for them to bring him back this year. I wouldn't count on him coming back this year. I wouldn't manage the team as if he's coming back, your dynasty team, as if he's coming back. And as far as dynasty rankings, I'm downgrading the entire team. It's clear Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt is going to be a pretty game script dependent back, at least at this current point in his career. And I don't expect the Commanders to be leading very often. So he gets a downgrade. I would still buy him low in dynasty. I'd be interested, depending on how far the market discounts him, which I suspect will be a lot. But he has to be behind Monangai. He has to be behind Woody Marks. He has to be dropped. Not dropped off your roster, dropped in the rankings. And then Debo, McLaurin, those guys are going to take a hit with Mariota. They're just not going to throw as much. They're not going to run as many plays. They're not going to be near the end zone as often. It's just not good. And then, Ertz as well has had much better chemistry with Daniels than with Mariota. So all these guys are taking a hit. It sucks, It just doesn't seem like an offense you're going to want a ton to do with. I will say on Marcus Mariota, he should probably provide like low-end QB2 production the rest of the way. If you can get him on the cheap and you really need a fill-in, if you have Jaden Daniels, that might be the absolute best option for your team if you're still contending. You're probably not getting a Joe Flacco at this point for less than a second. I think you can still get Marcus Mariota for less than a second, and I think he should be pretty usable because he does run. He's actually looked decent when called upon. So that's the one silver lining in this for me, at least. I have some really good Jaden Daniels teams, and that sucks. I do have Marcus Mariota on like 8 dynasty teams. So hopefully selling some of those, recouping a little bit of the lost value there on Daniels and Mariota. Next guy here is Rome Odunze. This one's interesting. As many of you know that have been following the channel, I was a big Rome Odunze fader. Some might say hater. I don't ever feel like I hated him. I just didn't like his ADP, and I never said he was a bad player. I just didn't think looking at his rookie season that he was likely to become a superstar. And this is not a victory lap, by the way, because I already folded and accepted defeat on Rome like weeks ago. And I was like, I guess I'm wrong. I guess he's amazing now. But it's just something to consider when you look at his full season sample now after this game. And obviously a 0 is gonna hurt you, but you look at a full season sample, he's sitting at 22% targets per route run at a 22% target share. He runs almost all the routes. So 22% target share, 1.86 yards per route run. He has a 25% first read target share, and he's at 13.5 points per game. That's not superstar numbers. It's not even wide receiver 1 numbers. This was kind of my concern, was like, I thought he could obviously improve from the rookie year, but I was worried that it would be really hard for a player who is as inefficient and struggled as much as he did as a rookie to make that leap to true superstar. And you can say, well, Caleb Williams is just not good enough and he's holding him back. Maybe that's true, but we knew Caleb Williams was going to be his quarterback. So I don't know. I think I'm going to drop him a bit in the rankings from where I had moved. I had tried to move him up as high as I reasonably could. I didn't want to be stupid and stubborn. I didn't want to hold back too far from the market. I think I was still lagging behind the market a bit the whole time. But I think he maybe needs to drop down a little bit from where even I had him. Like, I think there's legitimate questions. I already had Nico ahead of him. I think there's legitimate questions between Rome, Lad McConkey. I think there's a legit question between Rome and like Devon Achane, Bucky Irving. And then I think you can ask a legit question of Rome versus Garrett Wilson. And if Travis Hunter had stayed healthy, I think there's a possibility there would be controversy there as well. So maybe moving him down to like wide receiver 15 or 16, not anything insane, but that feels warranted after he's kind of come back down to earth a bit. And don't forget that this does correspond a little with Colston Loveland breaking out, and we still have Luther Burden kind of waiting in the wings as a question mark. I still think Luther Burden eventually is going to be a better player on the field than Olamide Zaccheaus. That's risk for Rome. The good news is DJ Moore will probably be gone after this year, so that could all even out. But yeah, wide receiver 15 is where he sits right now. And we'll see, how that changes, if at all, moving forward. I have Brian Thomas next as a faller, and honestly, I would still take Rome over Brian Thomas. It's just been so brutal this year. I do think he's injured. I don't believe that this is Brian Thomas at full health, but we don't know what his injury is because it's not being disclosed really, and we don't know if or when he's going to be 100%. I just know that if you're going to come out and consistently get outperformed by Parker Washington, you cannot be valued as a top 30 dynasty asset. That's just how it is. I think he's going to be one of my favorite buy candidates of the offseason, but I think for the time being, he's just really hard to trust. So I think he's going to move down. I think I would rather just have Travis Hunter straight up in Dynasty at this point. I'd rather have Jordan Love. I think on a contending team, if you want to trade him for Christian McCaffrey, I think that's pretty defendable thing to do. So yeah, I mean, I think that's where it is with Brian Thomas. I do really, really hope there's a bounce back. And I would look to add some shares on the cheap if you can. But that doesn't mean we're not going to adjust expectations. We absolutely have to. All right. Tucker Kraft is our next faller. Again, just a super unfortunate situation. Nothing to do with his play on the field. Just you tear your ACL, you're going to lose dynasty value because there's no points the rest of the way. People want to score points. I haven't decided how far Tucker Kraft is going to fall. I think he's going to be on kind of the late first, early second borderline. Probably won't fall any further than my tight end 7, though. I would have Loveland ahead now. I would have Gadsden ahead. I would have Laporta ahead. I don't think I would have Fannin ahead or Kittle or Ferguson or any of those guys. So probably tight end 7 for me. Again, late first, early second borderline. For what it's worth, Rob Gronkowski, I tweeted this out. Rob Gronkowski tore his ACL and MCL on December 9th, 2013. And the very next season, he put up 82 catches for 1,100 yards. Not saying that Tucker Kraft is Rob Gronkowski, but that being, I also don't think we're expecting 1,100 yards. But just showing, a big physical tight end came back from this exact injury that happened over a full month later in the year and did produce the next season. So I don't think we have to be super pessimistic right now about Tucker Kraft's recovery or how he's going to look in 2026. Unless we get some kind of negative updates, I'm just going to assume he's ready for week 1 and that he is going to come back and be, hopefully the same player that he was. So a little bit of hope there for Tucker Kraft. Keenan Allen, I already talked about him on the any second list, as well as Alvin Kamara. So I won't touch on these guys for too long. Again, both of them have roles that are kind of decreasing. In Kamara's case, you're talking about a guy that's on a really, really bad offense and also looks like a player in decline for sure. Keenan Allen, though, he doesn't really look like he's declined. Like, he actually looks much better than he looked in Chicago last year. I don't think he's necessarily fallen off as a player. It's just that he's not as complete of a wide receiver for what the Chargers are trying to do compared to QJ. And then also they want Gadsden on the field. So Keenan is becoming a situational passing down player. He's not running all the routes. He's old. So he's just a faller. He's not going to be a mid wide receiver 2 the rest of the way. I think he's more of a wide receiver 3 type. We'll close out the fallers with Tyrone Tracy. And then we will go back to some questions. All right. Tyrone Tracy. He was a major letdown in this game. He was supposed to step up as the workhorse with Scadaboo out. I figured he would be. I mean, I wasn't going to think he was going to do as well as Scadaboo, but I thought he would be clearly the lead guy. And instead, the team actually gave Devin Singletary more carries. It was actually pretty close to an even split. I think Tracy did get banged up at the end. Singletary got 2 more touches after that, but 8 carries for Singletary, 5 for Tracy. Similar number of routes run. Tracy had a couple more targets. This is just really, really gross. Basically, these guys are just both RB3 types, flex types. Not much here for Tracy. Like, I thought he could be a legit RB2 rest of season, unless there was something about this game that ended up being weird and this isn't their normal plan. I don't really see how you can trust Tyrone Tracy moving forward. So he'll be moving back down from where I had moved him up previously, back down into kind of the early 3 range, I guess. I just don't see what the point is with Tyrone Tracy. If he's not even a real handcuff that's going to get the feature role, I don't know what kind of value he holds. I'll give him another week to see if he can wrestle away more work from Singletary, but pretty brutal stuff. Would I trade Tracy for Andrews? I guess I don't know. I guess I would take Andrews, but I think I would just rather trade for someone else or for a pick. I'm going to need 7H John to walk me through this. Adunze is nothing without DJ Moore. I'm not sure I can even begin to wrap my head around what that means. I'm not sure what DJ Moore is accomplishing for Rome Odunze. I would say that Rome Odunze is running all of the real big boy wide receiver routes. He has the hard job. DJ Moore just like catches screen passes. I'm not sure what that means. I think Rome Odunze is like far and away a better real life wide receiver than DJ Moore at this point. I think he's actually very clearly the best wide receiver on the Bears. And that's actually working against him at times because they're asking him to do the real difficult stuff, the difficult job. He's not fully a sacrificial X receiver as Matt Harmon would say, but he is getting some of that, and he's not getting the design targets. So like he's gotten 2 design targets this year. The team has a total of 23 design targets. And more of those are going to DJ Moore, Olamide Zaccheaus, Luther Burden when he's healthy, and not to Rome Odunze. So I think he has a very difficult job. And I think there's still room for him to improve, which is why I wouldn't move him down too far. Last year, we saw JSN take a big step up from his rookie year, but he still hadn't transcended to superstar talent. Odunze might be more on that track. Odunze might be more on the track of like, he shows us in year 2 that he's still a good player, but he still has more room to improve. And then maybe in year 3, it's wheels up and he can actually do everything well. I think that's totally possible. So I don't know what, I don't think we need to be super critical of Odunze as like an NFL talent. I think he's clearly very, very good. It's just not the most fantasy friendly right now. So unless he's catching touchdowns. All right. Late first difference between Odunze and Ibuka. I think that's tough. I feel like it should be less than that, but I don't know if my rankings bear that out. Right now I've got Rome around 1.5 base first. I've got Ibuka around 2.25, which is, yeah, I mean, that's about a difference of a late first, so I guess that's fair. I think on most teams, I'd probably take the tier down there, or I'd be trying to use Ibuka to upgrade to a higher tier of wide receiver. But yeah, I guess it's about even. How do you navigate an inactive league with very few trades as a tanking rebuilder? I'm in a couple leagues like that. I think there's not really much you can do if people aren't going to trade with you. That's really the only thing that's available to you during the season. So if people aren't going to trade with you, then you're kind of just stuck sitting on assets. What it means is that you're going to end up having to take bigger value losses to move guys, or you're just going to have to hold them and hope that they can survive the season and that they can be productive for you in the future. Maybe be a little bit more cautious about which players you are acquiring or drafting, and not just thinking about who you can flip or sell, but thinking about who you believe in over more of a long span, because you might be stuck with those players. TaylorMade, I would rather not spend a third on Parker Washington, but I don't think it's like the most egregious thing in the world. Trade Garrett Wilson for Hunter plus. I would do that because I don't have them very far apart at all, only a few spots. It just depends what the plus is. I think you should very easily be able to get a second. And I think if someone's not willing to give you a second, they're being kind of stubborn relative to the market. And I'd probably just hold Garrett at that point. But if you can get a second, maybe a little more than a second, I'd be into that pivot. Running back targets for contending teams, I think Rico Dowdle is probably the best one right now. I mean, Travis Etienne is fine. Chase Brown is fine. Probably going to be upcharged a bit on that right now. Trey Benson, maybe, is like a sneaky one. He could come back in a week or two and at least be functional for you if you're like really desperate. I can see that you have McCaffrey and a bunch of question marks. Probably Woody Marks is probably your second best starting option there. So yeah, somebody like a Trey Benson could be a legit upgrade for you later. If you need somebody right now, probably Kareem Hunt, or actually they're going on bye. So ignore me. They're going on bye, and then Pacheco might be back. So not Kareem Hunt. Would you sell MHJ for Hunter or hold Marv? I have Hunter ranked quite a bit ahead of Marvin Harrison. So yes, I would take Hunter. Not really a question for me. Just traded Allen straight up for May in a Superflex rebuild. Did I get fleeced? I don't think you got fleeced. I have Drake May ranked 101. Even if you have Allen ranked 101, I think that's a pretty even swap based on what we've seen so far this year. And May is the younger player. So in a rebuild, I can totally see that. Let's see. Trade away Lamb for Hunter and Henderson. That's pretty interesting. I think I would keep Lamb. Thoughts on Bowers for Henderson and a projected mid 27 first, deep in a rebuild, trying to contend in 2028. 2028? Brother. That's too long from now. You're going to try to rebuild 2 more years after this year? Dude, that's too many years, okay? 2 years is the maximum. You need to be competing in 2027. It's impossible. I don't care how bad your team looks. Like you can't be rebuilding that long. In a non-tight end premium, I think the Henderson side has a slight advantage there, especially if you need more assets. How could I try to bridge Chase Brown to Breece Hall? What would be a good add? A second. I would add a second to Chase Brown for Breece Hall. Yeah, I think that's a pretty reasonable offer. Yes, you missed the Tucker Kraft funeral. I already did him. I went over him in the Fallers. We did the Tucker Kraft funeral. It sucks, but I think he'll be back and okay next year. All right, guys, we are going to wrap this up. I think it's time to close this out. Those are the risers and fallers. Any second list, whatever. If you tuned in late and you missed anything, feel free to go back, check the replay. Thank you guys for tuning in each and every week. Appreciate it. I enjoy doing these little recaps. Hopefully they add some value. They help you get a head start on the next week of Dynasty. If I helped you out at all, if you want more Dynasty content, if you want to continue this conversation in the Pure Potential Discord and the members channels, check out the link I pinned or the link in the description. You can become a member, gets you access immediately to the Dynasty ranking spreadsheet, top 250 players. I'm going to be working on updating that over the rest of this evening. It also gets you access to the Discord and weekly live streams, kind of like this one, just private for the members that I do every weekend. So just want to throw that out there. Hope you guys have a good rest of your night. Hope you win your matchups on Monday Night Football. I'm pulling for 19 points from Dak Prescott. Pretty please. All right. Take it easy, guys. Have a good night.